This is Talk About the Hill Country. Today on Talk About the Hill Country, we have a special treat for you. It's a holiday haunted Texas version of Talk About the Hill Country. Again, with another great folklore story from Ben Friberg of the Texian blog and the Texas Center at Schreiner University.
The Murder Steer. It was a cold and sleety afternoon. The cowboys watched their herds, wrapped tight against the tiny specks of ice coating their shoulders and hats and beards in a thin crust. It was the middle of winter, and ranchers were more careful with their cattle in these days of border raids. Bright's ranch was raided over Christmas 1917, and people were murdered. Texas Rangers took vengeance on a village up the river called Porvenir, killing 15 or so, almost all the adult men of the village. More than likely, all the men were innocent and simply suffered the thwarted vengeance of Rangers grasping at phantoms. But there was little mercy on either side of the river these days, and too much blood spilled over a century of border warfare for either side to think much of forgiveness. Now folks near Alpine awaited another raid in the sleet and flecks of snow. Jim Andrews was the first to see it. A shadow moving along the jagged rocks of a nearby hill. The shadow moved like ink or oil as it dripped its way down the hill. Jim squinted through the sleet, trying to keep the ice out of his eyes. Whatever it was taking its time. As other shadows passed and faded under the passing sun, this one lingered and grew. It took on a dark, grayish look, like ash in a dead campfire. Jim felt a chill run through him, guessing what it was. He'd heard the stories. He knew the men who'd seen it before. He hadn't totally dismissed it as myth, but he still hadn't expected to witness it firsthand, in the flesh. The original stories seemed too contrived, so whatever he was watching couldn't be that. But some sixth sense vibrated in his gut, and the fear tasted metallic on his tongue like copper and electricity. He managed to nudge his horse over to his compadre so he wouldn't have to shatter the silence with shouting. Henry Doolin was already staring at it. "You reckon that's it?" Henry murmured as Jim came within earshot. "That's what I come over here to ask you. Could just be a maverick. Wild. Could be. Should we go check it?" "I'd rather not, really, and I ain't wandering off from the herd for just one stray." "You're right, but I'll say this. I haven't seen one that type of color in any of the other herds in the area. And I'd trust Bob Poe. Bob said it was dang near that color." And both continued watching as the gray blotch on the horizon continued to grow. Here's the thing about the weather out in Big Bend. You can see everything it's doing well ahead of you on the horizon. It rolls on, seemingly across all existence, the heat waves bending the scene into ripples, stretching colors and light like taffy into smudges and blobs of newborn shadow. Clouds pile onto each other in layers, each in their own shades of white or gray, rolling over one another like ocean billows, beautiful, fleeting as smoke as they wrap piles of jagged peaks. Though it looks like something volatile and close, miles and miles and miles often separate it from you. So the grayish, looming figure should have taken hours to get close to them according to Trans-Pecos physics. But it didn't. It swelled, quicker and quicker as if telescoping toward them. And this didn't exactly settle their nerves. The cattle began to shift and began to low as they noticed the approaching gray smear of color. Nervous trembling rippled through the herd like a shiver down one enormous back. "I'm thinking we need to ride out to meet it, Henry, or we'll lose the herd if we wait for it to get here." Henry and Jim squinted at the growing sight in the distance, wavering and wobbling like a mirage against the receding horizon. The ice crackled beneath the hooves of their horses, and the air shimmered as crystals coated everything in a fine sheen. Their words faded as they silently watched the shape, growing closer and closer to meet them. Now they knew it was a steer, with the hide the color of ashes. It moved at a very slow pace, yet its legs seemed to cover a great distance in such a short time. At last, within 10 feet of them, it seemed, it stopped, and they stopped as well. No need to get any closer. It stared at them, its eyes not exactly dead, but unblinking, like those of a mounted head. Then it began to turn, and that's when they knew. The steer slowly revealed its side to them, like a banner. Their hearts lurched in their throats as they saw what they were expecting. The animal's entire right side was taken up by a single brand, stretching from belly to spine. The brand was a single word: murder. The cowboys spurred their horses away in a thundering gallop, tearing back toward their herd as fast as their horses could run. They didn't care if they stampeded the cattle. They didn't care if bandits stole them back across the river into Mexico. They simply galloped out of the valley, out of the county, and out of the region. There were plenty of other places in Texas where one could cowboy without worrying about spectral encounters. And they weren't the last to witness what has since become known as the murder steer in the Big Bend. They heard it blare forth a wild wail of what sounded like grief, like a calf wailing over a dead mother, like the voices of grieving children and women screaming for their dead in Porvenir, like Mother Nature itself wailing over the desecration of God's image at the hands of other men. The cowboys never forgot it, and never spoke of why their own hair later turned prematurely white. It's hard to pinpoint an actual historical birthday for most of our state's myths and legends. Many essentially begin with the frontier version of Once Upon a Time, ... But this tale is unique in that it has a definite footing in real history, rooted in the killing of a man named Henry Poe. He sported a full black beard and an empty sleeve, the sacrifice he laid on the altar of the Confederacy. In 1870, he came to Texas from Alabama, following the thousands of former Confederates fleeing the Old South, gutted by a civil war to start over in the relatively untouched land of Texas. By 1883, he grazed cattle on the open ranges around Mount Locke and helped raise the Alpine Methodist Church from the West Texas dirt. That all came to an end in the new year of 1891. Here's the eyewitness account of what happened January 28, 1891, told by Robert Poe, Henry's son, who saw his father laid low. The cold morning of January 28, 1891, roared with bawling cattle at Leoncita Springs near Alpine. Cowboys working for different ranchers sorted through 2,000 to 3,000 head of cattle, looking for those they missed back in the fall to brand. Henry Poe spotted an unbranded bull yearling wandering about without its mother. One of the cowboys near him swore the calf belonged to Henry. So Henry cut the animal from the herd and added it to his own. But a cowboy who worked for another rancher, Phineas Gilliland, rode up, eyes narrow, and growled Henry would play hell, proving ownership of the calf without the mother cow alongside it. He forced the calf back into the original massive herd, challenging the claim and the man behind it. But now that he was pretty certain that it belonged to him, Henry was bound and determined to have that calf. He cut it out once again. Gilliland once again rushed over and forced the calf back into the original herd. Henry turned his horse to reclaim the calf once again, and even roped it this time, but Gilliland spurred after him, unbuckling his saddle pocket and yanking a pistol. That was the final straw for Henry. Henry dropped his rope, and fired a shot toward the yearling bull. If he couldn't have it, no one would. But he missed. Gilliland dropped from his horse, kneeled to the dirt, both hands steadying his gun. Henry Poe's son, Robert, saw what was about to happen and yelled, "Look out!" But it came too late. Gilliland's first shot slammed into Henry's back. The wounded man fought to dismount, wrapping the reins around his single arm as the panicked horse jerked about. He hit the ground, turned to face his attacker, and the two men blazed away, 4 gunshots cracking across the field. Then Henry Poe's revolver clicked on an empty chamber. Gilliland rushed in and fired point blank. Poe staggered and fell face first into the dust, dead. Gilliland stood panting, 2 pistols glinting in the sun, while a voice cried, "For God's sake, don't kill that boy!" Someone thought he was about to shoot Henry Poe's son, Robert. He thought about it, but instead he swung onto a borrowed horse and galloped into the desert haze, leaving the chaos far behind him. Some of the remaining cowboys branded the yearling bull with the word murder on one side and January 28, 91 on the other side, then turned the poor bull loose into the mountains. But death travels fast, as they say, and Phineas Gilliland couldn't outrun it. He holed up in the Glass Mountains between Alpine and Fort Stockton, and Sheriff John B. Gillette of Brewster County sent the word out for every lawman nearby to hunt the murderer down. On January 31st, riding through the canyons of the Glass Mountains, through snow covering the trail in a white blanket, Deputy Thalis Cook and Texas Ranger Jim Putnam tracked the man-killer. As they walked their horses up a canyon, they suddenly spotted their man on horseback. Cook shouted out if he was Phineas Gilliland. Gilliland wheeled, firing twice, killing Cook. The deputy's horse stumbled and crashed dead, too, into the blood-spattered snow. Surrendering his horse, Gilliland bolted on foot, but Putnam spurred after him, firing 3 times, his bullet smashing into Gilliland, driving him to his knees. He dropped his gun in surrender, then made one last desperate lunge for it and one final gamble for life. Another shot from Putnam ended the game. Legends quickly grew up and tangled about the truth like poison ivy. Some claimed that when they buried Gilliland, the branded yearling, now known as the murder steer, bellowed in mourning all through the Glass Mountains, even though Gilliland was buried by his family far, far to the north in Snyder. Old-timers whispered that from then on, whenever anyone was murdered near Alpine, or anywhere in the Big Bend region, the murder steer made an appearance, blaring out grief like hell's trumpet. The old-timers in their rocking chairs and in the Greasy Spoon Cafe swore it served as the devil's own herald, its hair no longer brindle-colored, but seared ghost gray from damnation, wandering the mountains alone, like a bullock from the Old Testament bearing the sins of humanity upon its innocent head, cursed to roam the thin line between this world and the next. Pleasant dreams.
This was Talk About the Hill Country, a public service of KNAF AM 910. The opinions and statements of guests don't represent those of the management of HC Broadcasting, but we do want to hear from you, and if your organization has something going on in the days, weeks, or months ahead, and you'd like to come in and talk about it, call us at 830-997-2197, and we'll put you on our calendar so you can come in and let the Hill Country know what your organization has coming up. If you'd prefer, you can fax your information to 997-2198, drop it by our studios here at 304 East San Antonio, mail it to us at P.O. Box 311, Fredericksburg, Texas, or email it to knafnews@gmail.com. Talk About the Hill Country comes on every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. right here on KNAF AM 910, the voice of the Texas Hill Country.